Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this presentation today. My name is Katie Remington Cunningham, and I'm the Research Director at the Minnesota Justice Research Center. The MNJRC is a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to driving meaningful change to Minnesota's criminal legal system through rigorous and community-centered research, education, and policy development. As the Research Director, my job is to ensure our research is collaborative and participatory. We believe our understanding of how the system currently operates must be guided by those closest to the problems. We ground our work in values, and we engage in deeper thinking with our community about what justice means and looks like. And that deeper thinking is research for us. And the ideas and the lived experiences, those are data, powerful and valuable tools for change. Today, I'm really excited. My colleague and dear friend, Kayla Richards, and I are going to talk about how we engaged in community-centered research to help shape the design of a consent decree to change policing in the city of Minneapolis.
Thanks so much, Katie. Before we jump into our shared work and experiences, we here at the MNJRC want to offer some invitations that have really helped to ground and guide our work together and might be helpful for all of us to hold as we continue to do this work together. I know, and we here at the MNJRC know, that the consent decree itself, community policing, and discussion of transformation can be polarizing topics, and that they're often discussed within a theoretical context, right? One that can feel overly formal or really distanced from us and our experiences. But what we actually know to be true is that our experiences are not theoretical. Community policing in Minneapolis is not simply a concept or political campaign point. Our experiences are real, they're embodied. Here at the MNJRC and at our table, we don't believe we have to lobby one another to move towards a direction that's more affirming for all of us. We know that our experiences are not similar, that they are different, and we simply believe that. At our table, duality lives.
Thanks, Kayla. Our presentation today is a summary of a longer report that we recently released. As Kayla mentioned, duality is living at our table. So we really invite you to read that report because those findings are complex and the nuance and the detail matters. You can find that report on our website, mnjrc.org/our-work. There's also a link in the video description below.
Thanks, Katie. So for more than half a century, communities of color right here in Minneapolis have faced police brutality and discriminatory practices. We know this to be true. Following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, the Minnesota Department of Human Rights conducted an in-depth investigation into the practices of the Minneapolis Police Department and the City of Minneapolis, and they concluded what many Minneapolis community members have known and experienced for decades, right? That embodied experience, that the city and MPD engage in a pattern or practice of race discrimination. These findings led the Minnesota Department of Human Rights to launch the next phase of their work, the process of negotiating a consent decree, a court enforceable agreement with the city in an effort to enact meaningful change.
So learning from past efforts and experts across the country, the Department of Human Rights immediately made clear that a consent decree would need to be shaped by the needs and experiences of the community, especially community members who are most impacted by race-based policing. So during the summer of 2022, we worked with the Department of Human Rights to intentionally engage with community members in Minneapolis to collect critical input needed to design that consent decree. We prioritized our outreach to people of color, especially Black and Indigenous community members, and to those with direct criminal legal system experience. We also opened up the opportunity to share feedback to the wider Minneapolis community because all residents are negatively affected by race-based policing.
Thank you, Katie. So the Minnesota Justice Research Center staff and volunteers conducted 15 community engagement sessions with hundreds of Minneapolis residents, nearly half of whom were people of color and Indigenous community members. The sessions were mindfully designed and executed to leverage the collective wisdom in community and those different experiences that we mentioned earlier. Data collection was detailed. Because of the timeline of this project, data analysis took two forms. The first was at a high level. The Minnesota Justice Research Center Research staff process insights following every session to connect community input in real time with the team at the state to use in their ongoing consent decree negotiations. In addition, the research team scrutinized the data, categorizing the input using codes, and explored the content of these categories.
Thanks, Kayla. So with all of this hard work, we pulled out several findings, and at a high level, we'd like to present three main findings. So to shift policing culture, community members shared input on changes in practice and tools to decenter a culture of violence, the importance of reciprocal relationships, and finally, the need for more and better accountability. So we're going to talk about each three a bit in detail.
Our first finding is around the power of practice to change culture. So community wants MPD to change its practices to shift away from a culture of violence. More specifically, community wants to see clear protocols and limits that really guide practice. Community was also very clear that MPD needs to prioritize de-escalation tactics. And community wants the city to be more creative and expansive with public safety approaches that are varied and based in community.
Thanks, Kayla. Second, community centered their findings around the importance of reciprocal relationships between officers and community members. So as one participant put it, we just want to understand and be understood. So what this looks like is community really wanted to understand more deeply how the system of policing works, both seeing what's happening in MPD, so more transparency, and also having educational opportunities to better understand policing and how to transform public safety. In addition, community wants MPD to better understand them. They wanted MPD to better know the history of policing and of Minneapolis communities. They hoped they would better understand community circumstances, that police would better understand existing power dynamics between officers and community members, and also actually connect with community in positive and productive ways outside of enforcing the law.
Our third finding focuses on accountability. So community was loud and clear about an emphasis on accountability. Someone argued the hallmark of really healthy relationships. Community wants quality accountability systems and accountability systems that are community focused, skilled, and diverse, much like a hopeful monitoring team. A monitoring team is a team of experts chosen after the consent decree is submitted to the court. This can be an individual, but more often than not, it's usually a team that provides independent and expert assessment to ensure the city and MPD are both complying with the agreement.
So in addition to collecting critical input from community members around what they believe should be actually included in the consent decree, we also analyzed the experience of sharing the feedback itself. So we focused on the content of ideas as an outcome and also the process, these community engagement sessions as a process, as an outcome as well. Because we hypothesized the act of bringing community together and into this process of shaping the consent decree had the potential to be really consequential. And we found that community members felt really hopeful and grateful in the sessions. Despite decades of history, which demonstrates really the stickiness of actual change in race-based policing, community members showed up. And they didn't show up with a blind optimism, but a really tired and strong sense of hope. Community members believed that with the right people and the right efforts, that things might get better without distorting their reality or avoiding the hard work of change. And they were really grateful for the opportunity to be a part of that change. In addition, the process was also characterized by lots of disagreement and hard conversations. Nearly all the sessions were described as lively at some point. People didn't seem to shy away from sharing their inputs and insights, which were not all a monolith. Community members from different backgrounds shared similar perspectives sometimes, like the need for more accountability, but they also really disagreed on ideas like whether or not an officer should ever be armed, or whether more or less funding would ever shift police practices. But ultimately, community members found that opportunity to engage and to disagree a really profound way to move the needle forward together. At one point, one participant asked, but who's actually going to hold the police accountable? And another participant exclaimed, we are. To us, community members showing up and continuing to show up is exactly the biggest finding of all of this. Across the sessions, community members remarked that there was never enough time and they wanted more. They wanted more understanding of the process and more opportunities to engage. Community want more meaningful change. They want more connections with officers. Community wants the Minneapolis Police Department and the City of Minneapolis to do more and better, and they showed up and we're here for it. And we're looking forward to working more with them in the future.
Thanks, Katie. So what does this all mean? Now what? We know that a consent decree is not the only answer. The decree is really one tool in a myriad of efforts to create a more safe and just Minneapolis, one that we all feel good about. We know that this means that there's more work to be done, and we know that this means we all have to continue to show up for ourselves, our communities, and for one another. We know that accountability and transformation is a collective effort. And y'all, it's a shared responsibility. We also know that the approach to this very work is varied, right? We believe there's value in that difference and that we all deserve efforts that explore and push the boundaries of what feels possible today. Whatever your approach, I think our local community member, poet, educator, and activist, Kyle Tran Myrie, also known as Guante, said it best when actually highlighting the importance and utility of a different but relatable topic and mechanism, voting. When the haunted house catches fire, a moment of indecision. The house was, after all, built on bones and blood and bad intentions. Everyone who enters the house feels that overwhelming dread, the evil that perhaps only fire can purge. It's tempting to just let it burn. And then I remember there are children inside. There are people we love, people we don't know, people we may never meet, people we walk by who are currently impacted by and stuck in the institution of community policing. We at the MNJRC, and know a lot of communities as well, are choosing to not ignore the fire, but to work together to extinguish it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for that short presentation. There's a lot more in the report. Again, I encourage you to check it out and engage with us as an organization moving forward.
Thank you.